In her third budget, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman announced a handful of measures that could help boost the startup and MSME ecosystem in India. The first digital budget ever focused on ensuring the ease of doing business as she relaxed rules around setting up businesses and incentivizing funding for startups. India's fintech sector, that has seen significant growth in 2020, has seen an allotment of 1,500 crore rupees for a new scheme that will push growth further and incentivize businesses to offer digital payments. The budget has also extended social security benefits to gig and platform workers. The government will launch a portal to collect information on gig and construction workers that will help create health, housing, skill, insurance, credit and food schemes for this workforce. To incentivize startups, the eligibility for claiming tax holidays has been extended by a year to March 31st, 2022. To boost funding to startups, the Finance Minister has extended capital gains exemption for investments in startups by a year to March 31st, 2022. This, of course, will apply to only those startups that hold an IMG certification. While these were some of the key announcements, a long-standing demand on the removal of double taxation on ESOPs got no mention in the budget, and neither did the Finance Minister offer any clarity on direct foreign listing norms for startups. Well, hello and welcome to Young Turks, India's longest-running show on startups and entrepreneurship. I'm Shireen Bhan. To talk about the impact of the decisions taken in Budget 2021 for the startup ecosystem, we're joined by Vishwas Patel, Chairman of the Payments Council of India, Nimesh Kampani, the President of Let's Venture Plus, Ananya Sarthak, the co-founder and CEO of Avin, and Vishal Malhotra, the partner and leader TMT Tax at EY India. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the program. Vishwas, to you first, because, one of the big ideas that the budget put forward was that 1,500 crore rupees that's earmarked for financial incentives for digital payments. Of course, this is going to be linked to the hub that is going to be set up at the Gift City. But on balance, what do you believe this does to the already accelerated momentum we're seeing on the digital payment side?
Hi, Shireen. So look, the fintech industry has played a very pivotal role in providing financial services to SME and medium-sized enterprises, right? And this 1,500 crore announcement, hopefully it will be used. One is to top up the payment infrastructure development fund that has been set up by RBI. It entails to grow the acceptance network, specifically in tier 3 to tier 6, as well as in the Northeast. Also, the ecosystem providers have been facing a lot of loss because of the zero MDR on UPI and RuPay debit cards. Right, so some part of this 1,500 crores should be used to compensate the payment service providers, because it is this, our members, our providers who are going out in these villages and towns and trying to install a machine or put up a QR code, service that merchants, train them, and for processing that transactions to UPI and RuPay debit cards, if there's no money or incentive or revenue to be made, then the whole ecosystem is suffering. It was a pandemic year, so most of them did it for free. But going ahead, it's going to be very difficult. So I think some part of this 1,500 crore, if it is used to compensate these guys who are helping in growing the acquiring base, will be very helpful, Siri.
Okay, two important asks on your side on what this 1,500 crore rupees should be used for. Supplement the Payment Infrastructure Development Fund, which the RBI is looking after, and ensure that there is compensation, adequate compensation provided for the zero MDR regime. But on the second point, Vishwas, how confident do you feel that this money is in fact going to be used to compensate? Because on the MDR front, the government has been very clear and they have decided not to change their stance. So do you feel confident that, the compensation that you seek will in fact be provided via this fund?
We have made various representations. In fact, we met the FM also, and she's well aware of the hardships that are faced by the acquiring side of the business. Because if you see her words in the budget, it says that financial incentive to promote digital mode of payment. Right, and these are because on the issuing side, if you see, Shireen, there are 850 million debit cards in the market. There are credit cards, UPI numbers you are well aware of. There is net banking. There's so many others. So on the issuing side, it's sorted. It is the acceptance base which has to be grown, where in every kirana shop, in every food cart that you see on the road, there has to be a digital acceptance of payment options, right? And for that is where the focus should be. And I think if zero MDR is made on UPI and RuPay debit card, or with a bigger motive to grow the digital acceptance mode, but on the same side, you should also see that the acquiring side, since they are not going to make any money, how are they going to be compensated? Because like if you say that for the environment, let's reduce pollution, so let's make train travel free. But then who's going to bear the cost of running those trains? It's as simple as that. So even when we are putting up this technology and infrastructure to grow this acceptance fund, and if it is zero MDR and no revenue to be made, then who will invest? Hence, we believe that some portion of this will be compensated for those who are putting this infrastructure in.
I get the point that you're making, and you're absolutely right in pointing out that many representations have been made to the government, and which is why I asked you how confident do you feel, because those representations don't seem to have made any difference as far as the government's position on the MDR issue is concerned. But let me move on now and bring Vishal Malhotra into the conversation, because one of the other clarifications in the word of the CBDT chairman that's come in is on the equalization levy. Now, let me very quickly take our viewers through what the equalization levy is. It's essentially what is in common parlance been known as the Google tax ever since India imposed that. Now, the finance bill on the equalization levy says that royalty fee for technical services will be excluded, but equalization levy will apply regardless of whether e-commerce providers own the good or provides the service. The levy will be on the entire consideration, and this amendment shall be retrospective from the 1st of April 2020. So to start with, this is not prospective, it's retrospective, even though the government had promised that we will not go back down the road of retrospective taxation. And it seems to be widening the ambit of the imposition of equalization levy. Vishal Malhotra, what will the implications be?
So thanks, Shane. I think our view on this matter is that I think they've really changed the rules of the game as far as EL is concerned. Last year, when this levy was initially introduced, which was again without any public debate, because it came at the fag end that the budget was being approved, that this provision came in the law. Now, at that point of time, the intent appeared to be that the government intends to tax only digital services and digital goods. Brick and mortar businesses and services which will be enjoyed offline will be outside the ambit of this levy. So where anyone is operating his own platform to provide services or provide online sale of goods, digital goods, then there was the levy. Or if you were doing this activity through an e-commerce aggregator, then the levy was applicable. Also, the levy was only on the service provided by the aggregator in the case of an aggregator situation, because it said only the consideration received by the e-commerce operator is liable to this levy. Now what they've done is that effectively what they have provided is that this levy is applicable whether you are supplying digital goods or services, or you are supplying physical goods, or if the services are utilized offline. So if a person books a hotel, which is going to be, let's say, stayed in US, you will have to pay EL provided this hotel is booked through an e-commerce platform. So even if you take a train ride in London and you book it on the platform, there is an EL on that. What difference it makes is that whatever compliance today has happened, it has happened basis the last year's levy. When an e-commerce operator paid only on the commission which he earned, he paid a levy on. Now you have to pay the levy on the gross amount. So with the type of margins which are there, these aggregators are going to be in a rude shock, because this levy on the gross consideration is going to make a big dent on their bottom line. And as we discussed, this levy came in last year, April 1, and people have paid the taxes on a specific basis. Now, when you end up paying the tax on a gross basis, you have to pay the tax for the past. You have to agree your arrangements with the vendors and the service providers who operate on your platform. So it's I think it's going to create a huge problems for the e-commerce operator.
Okay, so you're saying that this changes the rules of the game, it comes as a rude shock and will have monetary implications as far as aggregators are concerned, which could be significant. So, Vishal, do you see this being challenged in a court? Because as you point out, this comes into effect retrospectively. So do you believe that this is likely to be up for challenge?
So I think it can potentially be challenged, but yes, on a go-forward basis, I think it can continue to stay in the law. So people can challenge for last year, but I think on a go-forward basis, you will have to maybe pay the levy, and the government may be well within its right to apply this tax on digital services. I think one important point which may be open to some level of challenge is that this levy was essentially intended to tax offshore supply of goods and services, where a person could sell through an e-commerce platform without setting up a presence in India. Now, what is happening is that these e-commerce aggregators which are operating now, they have not only customers and vendors overseas, they also have customers and vendors in India. So, for example, if you talk about booking a hotel room, you could have a situation where you go to a platform of a non-resident and an Indian can book a room within India on the platform. The way the levy has now come in, even that service which is provided by a resident Indian in India will become liable to an EL in the hands of the e-commerce operator. Now, whether that is something intended or is it again a lacuna in law, I think there will be a lot of such areas where there could be potential challenge.
Yes, and whether this is, as you point out, an unintended consequence of the change that's been brought in on the equalization levy regime. Maybe if representations are made to the government before the finance bill is passed, perhaps there could be some changes here. But at this point in time, as Vishal Malhotra is pointing out, the changes in the equalization levy regime are going to be significant and will come, in his words, as a rude shock for aggregators. Nimesh Kampani, let me come to you now. Many of the wish lists that the startups had put together, especially to do with ESOPs, more clarity on the promise of the foreign direct listing, that didn't come through. But at least there was some additional relief provided by way of the extensions of the exemption period by another year. What does Budget 2021 mean for the startup ecosystem?
I think the question, thanks Shireen, so the question is more akin to asking a child when you give a toy, that what else do you want, right? The child wants a toy store, right? So I think it's a positive move in terms of extending the timelines for the tax benefit. I think 1% company is also a very good move where I think it will encourage a reverse brain drain. But of course, you will have some wishlist items which will always stand, right? So if you ask me, my top 2 items there would be, one would be the IME certification, right? Where today, if you see the number of startups registered with DPIIT is around 43,000 odd, right? And the IME certification has been given to around 300 odd, right? And the certified companies are the ones who should get the ATISC benefit, as well as the ESOP clause benefit as well, right? So I think my top of the mind wish list would be the extension of this to all the startups registered under DPIIT. Second item that I would want would be the harmonization of the tax rates, right, for the capital gain side of things between the listed cap gains and unlisted, especially for startups, getting some kind of benefit. And I think the third one on the equalization levy, Vishal spoke a lot about it. One of the biggest items for small startups is the payment on advertisements, right? That still remains at 6%, and this remains on the person who acquired the service. I think there, if that also is harmonized into the 2% levy, as is said under this law, and the onus moves on to the service provider, I think that will help a lot of startups in the country.
Well, I guess the time for the wish lists are over now. Nimesh, the budget has been delivered and dusted, so time for wish lists are over, and I guess you are going to have to take what you've been given. And you're right in pointing out that the universe, within the universe that's registered with the DPIIT of startups and those that have been given the certification, there's a vast difference. 40,000 plus registered with the DPIIT, but only 329 who have the IMB certification. So you're right in pointing that out. But as I said, the wish list time is now over. But Ananya Sarthik, let me come to you now and ask you about what this means for the gig economy, because specifically what the budget has done is taken forward what was already stated by the government pre-budget. The finance minister says that the government will launch a portal to collect data on migrant workers. Social security benefits will be extended to platform and gig workers. Minimum wages to apply to all categories of workers. What will this mean for the gig economy?
Thanks for having me here, Shireen. The greatest takeback that we have here is the Social Security Code. We welcome the new Social Security Code with pleasure. And, you know, the gig workers has been a fancy and a popular term used by the entrepreneurs, VCs, and the journalists for a long time. And it's great that the government has now taken the much needed step of incorporating gig workers in the labor laws of India. You know, we are building the future of work at Avigna, and we firmly believe that the next 500 million jobs would come through gig economy. And this code would certainly encourage millions of job seekers to pick up gig jobs and also get the current gig workers to stick to the gig platforms. You know, there is a lot of chatter also on whether the Social Security Code would lead to increased liabilities on the companies. Now, if you think a little more, we would realize that the cost to company arising out of these benefits given to the workers is much lower as compared to the cost of attrition of gig workers in the market right now. So this code would change how the youth looks at gig jobs. It would get them to pick more and more gig jobs and get them to stick to them. And as the retention increases, the companies would save more as compared to what they would have to pay while offloading the benefit. So I think the greatest take back is the Social Security Code. You know, while I say
no, you're
this,
absolutely right in pointing that out. But, you know, I just wanted to ask you, Ananya, you know, since you spoke about how you believe that this will, in fact, lead to the formalization of the gig economy and will bring down attrition rates as well as make this much more attractive as a career prospect, as a career opportunity for young people looking at this. Do you see that, you know, have companies started to make that mindset change as well as organizational change in being able to provide for these benefits?
Yeah, that's a very valid point. In fact, you know, we have to be cognizant of the fact that enterprises in India right now are in a journey of transitioning towards gig as the primary route of getting the work done. So at Avigna, we work with large enterprises, we get their work done, so we understand their pain points a bit, and compliance is one of the largest pain points. So the devil would be in how the code is executed. See, the government wouldn't want the enterprises to have the burden of an onerous process of compliance. And, you know, they wouldn't want it to become a deterrent for enterprises to shift to gig. So although in the hindsight, it would lead to more business for us because we have been managing compliance for the years for now, but we can't have an onerous process of compliances. So that is where we would have to have caution and execute it well.
Oh, you're absolutely right in pointing that out. And at least the message that came in from the government, from the finance minister, was that the government would ensure that compliance burden, not just for, you know, when we talk about the gig economy, but compliance burden for the economy was going to be an issue that the government would look at. The DPIIT secretary telling me very clearly that a mandate has been issued to every ministry to look at how they can reduce the compliance burden. You know, just last week, as we were going into the budget, we had Urban Company talk about how in India they have to file 40 plus GST returns, whereas in other jurisdictions like Australia and Singapore, it's one. So, you know, the compliance burden, I think that certainly is something that the ecosystem has been talking about and hopefully will start to be addressed. But Vishwas, I want to come back to you. You know, you were right in pointing out that we've seen this explosion as far as the digital payment space is concerned. UPI transactions grew 103% in 2020. What do you see now as the next move within this space, within this specific ecosystem?
think the next new is going to come from the Reserve Bank of India. So after the passing of the Payments and Settlements Act, they are like God now. So they have all the powers. So three bold steps that RBI is taken now. One is on the new umbrella entity for retail payment systems. What it means that it gives a network kind of a license like what an NPCI is today, or globally in US, MasterCard, Visa, American Express, diners. So what will this entail is that private companies for profit will be given a license to run a network to build innovative products similar on the lines or better on the lines of UPI with their own branding, of course. So it need not be just a handle and a pin. In a UPI transaction, it can be your face and a pin where the transactions can come in. So this new umbrella entity for retail payment systems, once they get the licenses, I think a lot more innovation will come. So from there, we can increase the today 120 million odd transacting customers, digital transacting customers, to take it up to 500 million. And the acceptance points also increasing to around 50 million. The second bold move of RBI is, of course, the Payment Infrastructure Development Fund. How do we increase the acceptance? We already spoke. Because that is very required, because today, if you see, most of the salaried guys are at the end of the month going to an ATM, withdrawing cash, and then paying the Kirana shops or all the other shopkeepers or MSMEs everywhere. Can't they pay directly on a food cart or at a Kirana shop or everything? So that's required. That's another bold step of PIDF, where RBI is selling out money from its own pocket to build this fund. And even the networks are supporting. And if Finance Ministry also tops it up, it will be really helpful growing the acceptance base. The last step that RBI is taking is on the SRO.
Well,
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes. The last step that RBI is taking is on the SRO. That's a self-regulatory organization which the private players, the ecosystem players themselves can form the rules, and it has some legal sanctity and legal teeth to take actions and solve issues. This will boost consumer confidence in a sense that if we know that a particular frauds are happening, or between the players, we can build a negative database of be it not just merchants who are moving from one aggregator to another and defrauding customers, or even a negative list of fraudsters who have this fraudulent card numbers, or even in a cash on delivery situation where there are dropship locations which are fraudulent. So these three bold steps from RBI is the next big action points which can really take our digital payments, which is already the world's most advanced, to the next steps.
So that's now the wish list from the Reserve Bank that the digital payments ecosystem has. But Nimesh, Vishwas is talking about the RBI playing God on these issues. But let's talk about an issue where the government is going to be, the finance ministry is going to be playing God very soon. And that's on the issue of cryptocurrencies, with the cryptocurrency regulation bill slated for this session of Parliament. How are you viewing that? It looks like it's a little bit of a diluted version of the 2019 bill, but how is the ecosystem looking at the cryptocurrency regulation bill?
Well, I think obviously it says there will be exceptions to, if you read the entire regulation, I think there are exceptions to some of the things that are already existing. And I think this is something that will evolve, right? I think if once you have your digital currency that is issued by the RBI, plus obviously we'll have to see how the use case also works out in terms of transactions. Like today, if you look at the cryptocurrency, I think the transactions are minuscule as you would look at the overall transactions that happen digitally, right? So I think one is how the transaction evolution happens in that space, and as a store of value. I think those are the two uses of cryptocurrencies. But I think I would stress more on the blockchain side as well. Right? I think cryptocurrency is an outcome of blockchain. Cryptocurrency will evolve as it goes, but I think blockchain will be the next thing that you have to look out for in terms of simplification of a lot of digital processes and businesses. So I think currency, we can leave that to the RBI to work on. It acts as a store of value.
Yes.
Cryptocurrency, at the end of the day, just a store of value, and obviously the value keeps on fluctuating based on demand and supply. But I would look at the use case of blockchain more than just the cryptocurrency, which is one of the things.
Yes, we will have to wait to see when the government decides to move the bill. It is slated for this session of Parliament, and let's see what that brings in terms of debate and eventual regulation. Ananya, before we let you go, you said that it's now going to boil down to execution. If the policymakers are listening and drawing up the execution roadmap beyond the compliance burden, what is it that you would like to say?
Right. I think the one very important step which has been taken up, Shireen, is the creation of central database of migrant workers and of gig workers. I think that is something which is an immense step that is taken. If that is executed well, it's going to not only help into offloading the benefits of the insurance and so on and so forth. It would also help a lot of platforms like Avignu to get access to millions of new job seekers. So that is one step which has to be executed really well, and it's not easy to execute it well. If there is a database, a central database of like this which exists, we can tap into them and offload a lot of jobs to millions of people who are looking out for more work in their lives. So my entire suggestion would be to try and execute this well. We, in fact, are also working on how we can help in this with the government, wherein we have all the ammunition, and we are also figuring out if we can help them in creating this particular database. So the budget also talked about women gig workers, Shireen, and I think a lot has been, we have done a lot of things in order to get more and more women into picking up a lot more gig jobs. But a lot more has to be thought through to provide a more secure environment for women to work. And, women have a lot of unpaid responsibilities back at their homes. So we were expecting a little bit on flexible timings to come in the budget, wherein, women get that as a flexibility and their uptake increases in gig jobs. So I think that's where we are.
Well, well, that's where we are, and a lot of this may not necessarily have to be something that has to come through the budget. These are, of course, policy decisions that can be taken outside of the budget as well. Vishal, I'll give you the final say in exactly 20 seconds. Key clarification that you would hope for on the equalization levy as we go into the discussion on the finance bill.
So I think the main clarification is going to be what happens to India business. I think that's one where clearly there cannot be any EL. I think we talked about a lot this discussion on gig economy, and there are a lot of overseas platforms which are in fact facilitating gig economy by connecting freelance software engineers and other professionals with clients within India and outside India. And there is a lot of compliance obligations imposed in relation to such transactions. There is a withholding tax compliance on every payment which makes to an Indian worker. There's a 1% withholding. But again, I think this compliance is really coming in the way of ease of doing business, and how some of these platforms who in fact have been supporting this economy in a big way are getting badly impacted because there's a GST, there is withholding tax, and then there is somewhere a double tax because there's an EL and tax on the service provider. So I think that is one significant area where there needs to be a clarification and a comfort that there won't be any double taxation.
All right, gentlemen, we will have to leave it there. Appreciate you joining us here on this special edition of Young Turks as we take stock of the decisions that were announced by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman in the budget for the startup ecosystem. Many of the startup ecosystem's demands have been taken forward. There has been some relief provided, but some areas of disappointment as well, some areas that require clarification. Vishwas Patel, Nimesh Kampani, Ananya Sarthak, Vishal Malhotra, many thanks for joining us. We will take a break. There's a lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a moment with a lot more.